welcome back to the Awakener podcast. This is the Awakener. We have a new guest with you in show. This is Rocco. He's clearly comfortable and ready to go. And we're going to interrogate this guy, and we're going to get to the bottom of it because he knows exactly what's going on.
Oh,
do you know exactly what's going on, Rocco?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, I was just relaxing. Okay.
So what in your opinion is going on? Explain to me what's going on.
About
the world.
There's a lot of stuff that's going on.
Okay, let's start with Russia. First of all, you watched the Vladimir Putin interview with Tucker Carlson?
Some sections, yeah.
So what was your thought on that?
Well, there's a lot of...
hold on a second. If you had to trust him with your life, would you trust him with your life?
Versus, like, Biden?
I'm just saying, would you trust him? Would you trust what he tells you?
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Sometimes you know what a person is from inside or out, and you know, and you have a defenses against that.
Right.
So it's, for example, you know, going down the street in a dark alley at night, and you know you're alert. So if I was talking about Putin, I would know that, okay, I have to be alert, I have to watch for what he's saying.
Right.
And I would be always like on my guard. But the sad part is that the people who are running these countries now, for example, like Trudeau or Biden and all, they may appear like they're on your side.
Right.
But they may be, but they may like, they could be backstabbers, and they'll be probably doing worse stuff than what Putin would do to you face to face.
So how do you think Tucker Carlson handled that interview?
Well, Putin said that Tucker didn't ask him very like aggressive questions, like, you know.
So why don't we just have a question, heart to heart, and you pretend to be Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to pretend to be Tucker Carlson. So the important question that Tucker Carlson...
I can get in Putin's head.
No, but the important question that Tucker Carlson needed to ask was right frank to his face. Listen, if you're so obsessed with the expansion of Russia back to Arab borders of 1650 and the Tsars and all the stuff that happened, why did we not talk once about the Russian Revolution where the Tsars were killed?
So I don't actually think Putin would want to take over any part of Europe to go back to 1965. Okay, that's my personal perception. That's the narrative that the West has put out. I may be in conflict with you on that. You know, I mean, you can have the West coming out and say, because that's one reason, then they can justify NATO.
Right.
So to justify NATO, you need adversary, and that's the perfect adversary out there. So it's just an extension of the Cold War. Right. And now you can just bring it out here and say, hey, he's trying to take over Europe. I don't see any advantage, and I don't see how he could do it. Ukraine is a different issue. I don't think Putin is a stupid man that he would rush into Poland or Sweden or any Finland or any of these countries.
But the point is Vladimir Putin doesn't have to do that, because all they have to do is slowly change the ideology of the West to the way it used to be in the Soviet Union, and they basically can turn it from within without even actually having a battle here to say.
So,
do you understand what I'm saying?
So basically, you're linking up what's going on in the West right now. For example, the movement of the West towards authoritarianism, dictatorship, like communism. You're saying this is an extension of what Putin is trying to implement over here indirectly.
Right. Well, so the giant battle we're facing is we have two-way trains of thought. Well, number one, Vladimir Putin is a capitalist, and he's pro-Western values. He is looking toward, progressing peace in this world and everything that's going on. And it's highly false.
No, so that's not. My personal perception about Putin would be somebody who is like, okay, I come from this country and this culture, and I have a certain, like, this is what it used to be, and there is no reason why it doesn't resemble what it used to be, So it's been divided. You had 1990, Gorbachev, and all this stuff, Glasnost. So it's probably, hey, can I regain some part of Russian heritage back?
I'm going to accuse the Soviet Union basically about still being alive, and that was all a lie.
Of what? Of the whole thing, like Gorbachev.
Ever since, if you look at 1945 and the end of World War II, the UN agenda, or all these elitists, have historically always conned the Western world. So they conned the Western world. After the Western world, after World War II, was going to go all the way to Moscow and finish off the communists. And they said, no, UN agenda, world peace, we can't do that. The US bought it, and the Soviet Union, during this critical period of time, stole the nuclear weapon. We know this because Klaus Fuchs, right? He was the guy in Oppenheimer. He was actually the one, interesting enough, that used to work for Hitler and the Nazis.
Right.
That was sent through as a traitor to basically help the communists steal the atomic bomb. The UN agenda has historically always protected the communists, and you have to understand this. So stage one, from 1945 to 64, They protected the Soviet Union. And then they had
So hold on, so you're saying, so the United Nations protected the Soviet Union while they were trying to push on the Cold War, while they were showing Russia as an adversary?
Right.
So they were projecting Russia as the bad guy while they were trying to push for communism?
Right. So you have to understand the flow of things. So after World War II, everyone hated the communists. And America was fiercely anti-communist from that period of time to about, I would say, 1980, 1990. During this period of time, if you look at exactly where the Soviet Union was in regards to this battle, and you look at the United Nations agenda and what they were trying to do, the United Nations agenda is a collaborator with the Soviet Union. All these people like George Soros and crew are all collaborators for the communist conspiracy. That's the one thing that people have to understand and recognize, and once you see the entire lie, right? So case in point, how strong was the USA after 1945 when they had the atomic bomb? They were the most powerful.
They were the most powerful.
They wanted to go to Moscow.
Yeah.
So what stopped them from going to Moscow with Operation Unthinkable? It was all the UN agenda of, oh my goodness, we cannot have world war anymore.
What would the US have gained? But the US went into...
No, I'm just explaining it to you. I'm explaining to you over time frames, okay? So basically, right away, they protected the communists, okay? What happened when the US was more powerful from 1950 to about 1978, during that period of time? In that period of time, when the US was using its power to go overseas in proxy wars to whittle away the communists and their influence, what was the UN agenda always selling during this period of time? They were selling, stop the Vietnam War, no more war, stop this, bring our boys home. And they were purposely, all their agenda at this time was to stop all this war and nonsense against the communists. It was to protect them.
So you're saying indirectly they wanted to encourage
Martin
communism?
Luther King, all those kind of wave movements were all from this UN agenda, were all passing.
So you're saying all these guys were indirectly trying to push for communism?
Right. So then what happened in the fall of the Soviet Union? So in 1989, Russia had a GDP half of Canada's. China had a GDP half of Canada's. And combined, they had $1 trillion of GDP combined, and the US had 8. They couldn't beat the US in this war. So when they were facing their own defeat because the US was becoming so powerful, who told you that the Soviet Union collapsed? George Soros and crew. They all told you the Soviet Union collapsed.
Well, they actually did break it up.
Well, but how do you know? Because the current guy who leads the Soviet Union, or Russia, used to work for the Soviets.
Okay, so he's a
hardline communist.
So explain, some people might be questioning, when you say collapse, and you saying it didn't collapse, it did collapse because you could see the currency collapse, you could see the lifestyle, the standard of living.
Right.
I mean, people were lining up for bread, like miles around the corner.
They had no choice but to play dead. So basically, they ushered in this collapse of the Soviet Union.
So you're saying that George Soros and all made a pact with the Russians
They've been working for them for decades.
Okay, so they make a pact with Russia.
That's what people are going to learn.
So with Gorbachev, and they make a pact, and they try to show to the world that Russia has been divided, and Russia is weak.
Right.
Okay.
Now, and then who sponsored, gave Russia all these loans? It was George Soros. George Soros gave millions and millions of dollars of loans to Russia. Okay,
so if that's the case, then why is George Soros right now, for example, the Hungarian election, why is he so, why didn't he want Viktor Orban to come in? Viktor Orban still is more appreciative of Putin than the other opponent. Why would he be pushing against that?
Because
if he was still supporting Russia and Putin.
Because everything right now is about the collapse of the USA. So George Soros' candidate was Barack Obama. To understand all this, Barack Obama's agenda on the USA was specifically what the Soviet Union would have dreamed and fantasized about in the 1970s.
Right.
For them to be given the upper hand where America was weak and ready for fiscal collapse, for Israel to be surrounded with Islamic radicals, for Islamic radicals to be embedded into Europe, for North Korea basically to have miniaturized new technology and be completely ignored, for China to have a GDP almost of the USA. This was like their fantasy world they could only hope and dream for back in the 1970s. The only people who have brought this to be was the same people who control our government who have led us to this death slowly, very covertly for the last 40 years.
So basically you're saying is that Russia indirectly has been
Russia collapsed.
Has been monitoring, has been controlling the U.S.
Right. Through various acts of
through various policies,
politicians,
leaders, politicians, and so basically to make a scenario where U.S. becomes weak.
Right. To make the Western world weak and ready for
and
takeover.
Then it's ready for communism.
Right. Ready for takeover.
Okay.
So this is like what.
So that might go. I might agree with that because when you look at what the degradation in the moral values in the states and all the confusion about gender and all that stuff. That's what's happening. Like,
Yeah,
so all the chaos, all the illegals, all the stuff.
it's a KGB
so basically,
attack.
you are weakening the Western world, okay, indirectly.
Right. So basically, Vladimir Putin has come out and said, okay, I'm for Western values. I say it's false. Number one, you're still funding North Korea. You're still funding Iran. You're still helping China. False. You're lying. Right? Number two, Yandex is a child pornography free-for-all. Who goes on Yandex? Not me or you, but certain maybe politicians in the Western world who are being co-opted or blackmailed, and these people are then put into positions of power. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out more about that.
But that's, I might agree with that, because when you see all these politicians act the way they act, it actually feels like somebody's got something on them.
Exactly. They're all being co-opted.
Right.
And so they come back and they're basically passing agenda. The agenda looks good to people who are asleep, but the agenda is basically the killer. It's the killing from within.
Right.
Carbon taxes, climate change, all this nonsense is basically to break the Western
To
world.
weaken the states, yeah.
Right.
So what would be the end game? Okay, so you have more polarization now. So it's becoming clearer ever since the Ukraine war started. Okay, so Russia and China together, they're exchanging. Even though there was sanctions and embargo on oil, they are together. Now with the Israel incident, so you can see Iran, Hamas, they're all together with Russia.
And Russia.
So they're all together. So you actually have sections that are now people can see, okay, like this is a different, two different coalition groups that are forming now.
If you look at specifically after Trump's presidency, so if you look at COVID and the agenda that's going on between Lebanon, Iran, Russia, China, Syria, all this stuff, North Korea, they're preparing for the truth to come out. They're preparing for Barack Obama's failed attempt to get us in the dark to be exposed, which means they're preparing for what Barack Obama led them to the table anyways. The UN agenda was the one who told you to vote for Barack Obama. Obama was the poison pill on America. After 9/11, people really did not talk too much about race. They didn't talk too much about gender. America wasn't divided. People were like this. And now America's basically in a world of hurt. And this is all happening for a specific purpose. Now, Barack Obama's presidency failing has led to Russia and Putin organizing all this, which is why do you think North Korea now in the news?
But hold on, I'm going to go back one second. You said Barack Obama presidency failing. How did he fail if he actually achieved the objectives of weakening the U.S.?
He did, but
all the divisions and everything.
His final objective was not reached.
So what do you think is his final objective during his presidency?
In his movie,
presidency,
in his movie, Death to America.
Okay.
So
but how would he achieve that? Like during his presidency, let's say, or
okay, you're in the USA right now. The entire agenda.
No, I'm talking 2016, before Trump got elected.
Right. But everything relates to Hillary's presidency. So think specifically, what would things be like in Hillary's presidency?
So Hillary's presidency would have been a continuation of Barack Obama.
So how big would ISIS be right now?
Oh, they are probably running all around the West.
Okay, so how many EMP weapons would North Korea have in?
Sorry?
How many EMP weapons would North Korea have in the space? 10,
probably,
12?
Probably.
Would the uranium taps be completely on, where the U.S. uranium was just being funneled every single month, hundreds of thousands of tons going over to Iran and North Korea? What would we be concerned about here in America if we were in Hillary's presidency? We'd be all talking about guys in the bathroom, and this isn't allowed. You wouldn't have an opinion on the internet. This podcast would not exist. People wouldn't be tuning into this podcast. You know what would happen to me for having this podcast if Hillary had won? You have to understand that Barack Obama's final objective was actually pinning his plan on Hillary. That plan failed, and now it's turned into a big catastrophic mistake. So hold
on. Why do you say it's a mistake? Biden's been there for 3 years, so it's a continuation of the same thing.
No, because now it's turned into a smash and grab job. The communists haven't gotten what they want.
But I mean, 3.5 years of Biden has brought us, he's probably recovered everything, whatever they lost during the Trump time.
It's far less worse. It's far less worse. Okay? So basically, America was on the verge of collapse and defeat. Things are far less worse than they are now, but the illusion is being sold, but this is a totally different topic. We've talked about Joe Biden and what he's working for. But things are not as bad as they would have been if Hillary would have won. So because of that, the communists are now going ahead with their own plan. Do you understand? So if you understand what Putin is doing, you understand what he's financing with Iran and North Korea, how do you think hypersonic missiles, that was in the news yesterday, how do you think North Korea got hypersonic missiles out of nowhere now?
Yeah, it's probably
from Russia.
From Russia, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think China also has technology for that, no?
Yeah, but regardless, right? North Korea is getting them from somewhere. And how do you think Russia and China, where do you think they got it from? They got it from stealing it from us. It's just that simple.
But the US doesn't even have their own hypersonic.
They do have hypersonic technology. If you looked at the news, the US has had a hypersonic technology.
They tested one, but the Russian one was like longer. It could go much
right, but the US
further.
has basically had it in a shelf, right, where they had to dust it off, and they've had to rapid put it in play. My point of all this is that basically people are on one side that Putin is a good guy. Well, how can Putin be a good guy when he's doing this?
No, okay, so let's go back.
If Putin was really pro-West, right?
No,
he
no,
wouldn't
okay,
be doing
hold
all
on.
these things.
Hold
the
on.
evidence shows.
Okay,
I
have one thing. Nobody in the West right now would actually say Putin's a good guy because they're like, okay, he attacked Ukraine and stuff. What the people are getting?
don't know.
Hold on.
I have family members who still.
No,
think Putin is a
what
good
people
guy.
get upset about is the amount of money that's being spent in Ukraine without any emphasis on putting an end, a peaceful effort. Let's say for a common person who doesn't get involved with all this stuff.
Do you know why the
they're
US
like,
is
okay,
sending
why
all
would
this
you
money?
not? Why would you not try for a peace effort instead of just funneling billions and billions of dollars into a failed war?
Okay, but do you know why? Do you know why they're sending all these weapons and technology to Ukraine? It's because the U.S. military-industrial complex knows there was going to be a gigantic war pinned on it. They know. You have to think about things as a smash and grab job for a bank robbery. Okay? Barack Obama was the one who set up the giant bank robbery for the Soviet conspiracy. Because that bank robbery, they've gone in there, and now it's become a complicated job, and it's going to turn to a smash and grab shootout over the world. That's why the US is sending all these tanks and stuff, because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter to save the currency anymore.
Okay.
There's no point. When you know your enemy is at your throat and is going to make a run for the vault, you stop it.
But hold on.
It's no different. That's all
So,
this is in
so
simple
on one
form.
side you're saying like the U.S. is trying to send all this because it's the last effort and they're sending it because it doesn't matter. But then you also said that Russia has infiltrated everything in the West and the leaders are all working to bring in communism. Then how can both things balance?
Well, because the agenda.
On one part you're saying it's fighting against Russia to end communism, the same leaders that are supposedly bringing the downfall of the states.
But you know that the leaders that are bringing the downfall of the states are all getting rejected right now. The current prime minister in office, he's getting rejected. Historic
People
polls.
are still going. They will still.
But historic polls are showing that he's being rejected.
The polls mean nothing. I don't believe it.
They
At the end of the day,
they
it's
do
like,
mean nothing. But a political class is getting rejected, and believe me, that if Hillary was still in office, you wouldn't be sitting here talking about that.
The only reason the polls are getting the only reason some people are not waking up, which is a big majority, is because they're not getting the information, the media, and stuff. Because they don't report and people don't have.
But people are getting the information. The amount of people awake 7-8 years ago had no idea what Barack Obama was doing, and now look at this. When I talk about this, people are like, "Oh, that makes actually sense what he was doing." Everyone is slowly, whether they agree with it or not, or everyone is slowly being unplugged now through information.
So what do you think is going to happen now? Because now they're bringing in more.
Well, the communists
so the war is still going on, and the election's coming. So what do you think?
So the Soviet Union could never beat America in war. They were never in a fiscal position to do it or a military position to do it. Where do you think things were at the end of 2016?
No, I understand, but now
just answer the one question. At the end of 2016, Russia and China were literally within a millimeter of beating us in a world war. This is the closest they've ever been to the vault for it being their world and for us being the small ones. So after everything that Trump has in his presidency and their failed plan to get us with nobody knowing, that doesn't mean they're going to go for it anyways. They're going to go for it anyways. If you know your enemy is going to go for it anyways and modify the world via force regardless, you would send all these weapons to stop them.
Okay, but
the whole understanding of all this is that Hillary was
so our audience, they might want to know. Okay, so with this background, with this background,
people unfollow me because as soon as I mention Putin is a bad guy, I disagree with you, I unfollow you.
So here's the
evidence. The evidence does not support that Putin is a good guy. Putin is still funding Iran. He's still funding Lebanon. If your argument is that Putin is a good guy, there is a million holes in your argument right there.
The
only argument that
nobody's saying
sense,
Putin is a good guy or a bad guy. I'm not saying
the only argument that does make sense is that Putin is ex-KGB, and the Soviet Union has taken over politically and is being operated through a small group of oligarchs and Putin and military generals, and still exists. This would explain their same agenda being disguised to you in deceit. Their same agenda is funding the same people. The same people want to still attack and destroy the Western world. Nothing's changed. This is the closest they've ever been to defeating us. Right? Thanks to Barack Obama. Barack Obama sold them a job. They were salivating at his presidency by then, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how weak the USA is and how ready they are to be basically defeated. And now it's turned into a big smash and grab job. The U.S. industrial complex knows it's turned into a big special.
Okay, so what?
So this is specifically why they're
So
doing the things they're doing.
let's say in your scenario, let's say Putin succeeds or that bloc succeeds in their agenda.
Well, they won't succeed.
No, hold on. No, I'm just giving a scenario. What would it look like? What would the situation look like in the West? Like, let's say 2 years down the line.
Did you watch Barack Obama's movie?
Let's say they succeed. Okay, so what would be the scenario?
So Barack Obama's movie was specifically, the U.S. would be confused. Everyone would be arguing about gender
they're already
ideology.
confused.
I'm explaining even worse. It's even worse than it is now because you wouldn't be having this podcast with me.
Right.
Okay? You'd be in jail with me for sitting down here having a podcast at 8 years of Hillary's presidency.
Right.
There would be no conversation right now.
Right.
Nothing. All this awakening that is happening with the truckers convoy and all the people talking about this suspicious stuff, none of this would have happened.
Right. I
None.
agree. Okay.
There would have been no information coming out that any of this is true or any of the treason is going on. They would have buried it all. So to understand all this is that if there's no conversation and ISIS is surrounding Israel and they're beheading radicals tens of millions every single year and North Korea's EMPs and they have all the technology to defeat us and we're all arguing about who's in the bathroom, they literally could pull off what they did in Barack Obama's movie was a hostile takeover without anybody knowing. And the whole key to this hostile takeover is to do the hostile takeover under the guise of a security threat where something drastic happens to us with our own material, our own uranium, and our own technology. This would lead them to basically having this takeover complete, and it would be our own fault we lost this war. So come to war.
Okay.
So all it's understanding is Zelensky and crew and all the global establishment is saying, hey, come to war, face the communists, we're preparing our defeat. Now the U.S. military-industrial complex knows that they're bringing us to war, has put certain protocols in place where they can't get access to this uranium ore and say, okay, now we'll come to war because we know we're going to do this to you. There's just two imperialistic forces that are in a war with each other. That's all that's happening.
Okay, so if the same scenario continues the next couple of years, what do you think is the final? Like, what's
the Western
scenario?
world is going to have the communists by the throat. That's what's going to happen. And if Putin was
so how long do you think how long do you think that scenario would come
I told my
up?
leaders that, like my listeners, that Joe Biden is the optical illusion. We've been saying that since basically the first week that he got elected.
But I mean, Joe Biden has been run by Barack Obama.
Yeah, but that's the military
so.
is listening in one ear of Joe Biden's presidency to everything Barack Obama is doing, and it's very, very obvious. It's very, very obvious. An act of war was done to get Joe Biden in office. What makes you think that the U.S. military hasn't just cut a deal with him and just said, hey, now you have to betray the communist conspiracy? How am I going to betray the communist conspiracy? Well, you act like you work for them. You lead them to their death. You put a Chinese spy balloon over, you open the borders. Oh yeah, I work for you. Come to war, and then what do you think is going to happen?
Oh, okay. So
it's an optical illusion. Joe Biden's presidency is the optical illusion. We're the only ones that predicted this basically at the start of the... Insider's right over here. Insider. Did we not predict this?
Yes, we predicted it.
See, exactly. We predicted this. So this is a complicated war game that we're having. That's all it is. And like Vladimir Putin is an evil, evil guy. If I was sitting down with him, Tucker Carlson, I would say, you know what really matters? I think that we'll talk about the Russian Revolution. So what happened in the Russian Revolution? Well, the Tsars were overthrown. Everything you talked about in 1650 about Russia was all about the Tsars. So now the Tsars don't exist anymore, thanks to the Russian. How do you feel about the Russian Revolution? Well, you used to work for Soviet interests. You used to work for the KGB. How do we know that you're not still working for them? These are the questions that Tucker Carlson should have asked, but like he'd be dead. It's just that simple. To me, this is a Soviet communist plot to basically get the Western world. Barack Obama had them within literally a millimeter of being successful. And now the whole thing is unraveled. But that doesn't mean because of greed and lust and the passion to defeat us that the enemy is so close and they're just like, why don't we just take a chance? And if you look at what Russia's doing...
my objection with all your argument is like you make Biden and all look like they're some sort of like saviors, and
no, I don't think
whoever his controllers are,
I don't think Biden
just optically even to look at like the amount of damage they've done like to the country. I don't think like even if you.
I don't think Biden is, I'm not saying that.
It's like burning your house down trying to protect your car from a car thief, man. Like, you know, I mean...
No, I'm saying the reality. Do you want me to be honest with people or do you want me to lie to them? The reality of the situation is there's two imperialistic forces. This is the reason we don't have peace, because of imperialists. Now, if you understand the war and the two sides, there's the communists and there's the military industrial complex of the USA. So the USA right now is in basically hidden stealth war mode, which will, unfortunately, they're going to tear down the entire world to protect the Western world. Barack Obama was such a traitor and put the whole Western world at stake that we're basically an
So why would he come up with that movie then if he was to...
Because he's bragging.
Why is he showing his cards to the people?
He's been bragging about it for years, having a White House Correspondents' Dinner and joking that he has some secret plan. I showed you all those movies. He's like, oh, I have some secret plan, ha ha ha. Like, he's been doing this for years. And the whole media has told you that he's wonderful, but he was literally a traitor to the Western world. Everything he did was to set up the enemy for our fall, and now he's like, okay, now I set up the fall, I'm gone. We'll get Hillary to do it, and now it hasn't worked out. And it's like the movie Heat. What happened with the movie Heat? They all walked into the bank, they're like, oh, this is the easiest job we ever had. $13 million, they're laughing at the 3 guards. And what happens 5 minutes before the bank robbery? Someone calls it and tells the cops.
Yeah, so
and what the cops show up and it turns into a shootout. Yeah. So now Russia and China are literally preparing for a shootout. If you look what they're doing with North Korea, if you look at what Russia's doing and sending all the uranium to China to be enriched, and you look at everything they're doing with their Middle East partners, they're preparing to take over the power in the world themselves. That's very, very simple. And the US is playing dumb.
Right, so what kind of timeline are you looking at for some stuff like that to happen?
It could be next week, it could be 6 months, it could...
So you think probably after the election, like, probably?
Because it could be before the election. If anything happens to Hunter Biden, where Hunter Biden is indicted of being like a Chinese spy, or it's official, then Joe Biden is on his way out, right? And you know who else is going to be on the way out? Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is tied into his business deals all through the email network. So who becomes president of the United States? It'll be a Republican. Do you think Vladimir Putin wants a Republican on the Ohio-class submarines? Do you think China is going to go for Taiwan when the US has Ohio-class submarines ready to nuke them? There's no way. They're being goaded into making a mistake when Joe Biden is leaving office.
Okay.
Anyways, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I love you all. It was great to have Rocco on. We'll talk to you again.
Very interesting. Yeah.